So they really, almost to a T, they hated English and thought it was just a torture. So my main goal was just, hey, English can be fun, and let's sing a song and see that English can be fun. And eventually that evolved to bringing in a CD player, a portable CD player, and then finally, using YouTube videos and, MP3s and things.
Wow. I almost feel like we should tell some of our younger listeners what a boombox is, a cassette player, a boombox. Well, I guess you didn't say boombox.
In the episode notes, you'll see.
Listeners, who remembers boom boxes?
Oh, I think she said portable CD player.
Okay, you're right. Heather just reminded me of those massive boom boxes we used to carry around on our shoulders.
Old school,
yeah. Old school. But anyway, CD player, cassette player, YouTube, Spotify downloads. There are just countless ways to bring music into your classroom.
And the reasons to incorporate music in the language classroom might actually outnumber the media you've listed, Shey.
Yes. Like our guest Heather said, music is a wonderful way to make learning English fun.
Yeah, because that really is the first step, right? If English is fun, the rest comes along with it. This reminds me a lot of what Dustin said in our Friends of the Podcast episode, remember?
Right. He talked about the importance of making learning fun, and that sometimes that can be the point of an exercise, just fun. But that really is just the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. Yeah. So in this episode, we're speaking to our friends, Heather and Ece, co-creators of the podcast English as a Singing Language, about just how useful music can be in teaching English.
Let's do it. Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Shey.
And I'm Anna.
Today, we're super excited to talk about how English teachers can capitalize on English language music and instruction. Something that Anna and I haven't experimented with too much ourselves, right?
That's right. I mean, of course, we have all heard about the benefit of using music in the language classroom. Learned a few chants. We might have tinkered a bit, but I think like a lot of educators, or actually maybe we're just not the norm, but we're the exception. But at least the two of us, we've both been a bit hesitant to dive in face first.
Yeah. So we've called in two lovely educators we met when at TESOL in Pittsburgh last year. They came to a talk we were giving on how to create your own podcast. And since then, they've launched their own successful student-facing podcast, English as a Singing Language.
It really is a great podcast. So without further ado, let's learn about Heather and Ece.
Sure. My name is Heather McNaught, and I'm a she, her. I did my undergraduate and graduate degree at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And then when I graduated, I went far and I stayed long. I went to Taiwan. I'd studied Chinese in graduate school and wanted to learn some Chinese and teach some English. I'd studied applied linguistics and got my TESOL certification. So I taught in Taiwan at a language center there. I was there for almost 20 years and then moved back to the U.S. in 2009 and wanted to be near Cleveland. I'd grown up in Cleveland, so I was looking around what's near Cleveland, and Pittsburgh is near Cleveland. So I got a position at a small private university here, and then 12 years ago, I came to the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm the assessment supervisor here at the IEP. And yeah, I've been very fortunate to be able to teach language for my entire career so far. That's my first love. For sure.
Oh, what a wonderful breadth of
cool.
experience. Yeah, wonderful. And how about you, Ece?
My name is Ulus, and my pronouns are she and her. And I did my undergraduate and my graduate at Pitt, at University of Pittsburgh. During my education, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I think like a lot of English as a second language or English as a foreign language teachers, they kind of use the teaching as an excuse to travel because I really like traveling. So that was my initial plan. But then once I started teaching, I really enjoyed it. So I went abroad first to Japan for about a year. And then I went to Egypt for 2 years on the English Language Fellow program. But then I came back to Pittsburgh, and then I started working in the intensive English program.
Wonderful. Also a wonderful breadth of experience. And because they're regular listeners, they knew what was coming.
No, this is the part I've been telling Eche. What's the icebreaker going to be? What's the icebreaker going to be?
We want to ask you, what is a song that you use to get yourselves pumped up and one that you use to calm yourself down?
My calm down song, I'm a big James Taylor fan, and probably my favorite song ever is Close Your Eyes. Mm-hmm. So close your eyes. That is a great calm down song. A lot of his songs are really good. Mellow out songs,
Yeah. And Eche, how about you? Are you, maybe you have a pumped up song you want to share?
Does it have to be in English?
No, absolutely not.
Actually, I do have one off the top of my head. It's actually a song that is used in Zumba classes.
Cool.
It's called Cuando Baila.
I know it.
Oh, you do know it?
I do.
Okay.
I'm a reggaetonera.
Oh, all right. Well, good. So that I've been listening to that a lot actually when I'm driving to work. So that's been helpful for me the last few days.
Yeah, good. Get you through the end of the semester, right?
You can never be fully prepared for an interview with us.
Nope, you make us sound so evil, Shey.
Brief torture. After we had our fun, we got right into it. You have this wonderful podcast for students teaching English through song. So we're curious about, how that started. When did you start integrating songs into instruction? How often do you do it? And how common a practice is it for you on a daily basis?
Well, I started using songs in teaching from the very beginning. So I went to Taiwan, as I said, and this is the early 90s, so carrying a giant cassette player to class. And I was an inexperienced teacher. I can't say there was really any language purpose necessarily other than to just have fun and get my students to see that learning English could be fun. They were freshman students in university. They had learned English in middle school and high school, so for 6 years. And it had been drill and kill and test, and memorize grammar to a T. They hated English and thought it was just a torture. So my main goal was just, hey, English can be fun, and let's sing a song and see that English can be fun.
Wow, awesome. Eche, how about you? How did it start for you?
So similarly, when I went to Japan to teach, I taught at a conversation school, and part of the job was teaching kids and some very small kids. And so songs were a huge part of the teaching. And I really enjoyed that. And so when I came back to Pittsburgh, teaching adults, I wanted to try to integrate some music and songs, but our curriculum was and is very structured. Not a lot of room to kind of use songs to the extent that I wanted to. So we decided to make kind of an extracurricular activity that would be optional for the students that we called Language Music Club.
Fun.
Cool.
So we've learned from our students that the title is not very engaging or exciting, but we did want to phrase it in that way to emphasize that it's not just listening to songs for fun. We are focusing on language, but in a fun way. So we've been doing that every semester. Our term is about 4 months, so we try to do it like 3 or 4 times a term for 1 hour, and it's been a lot of fun.
An instructional strategy holds weight when an extracurricular is created just to use it even more, right?
And this origin story just keeps getting better.
you both have a really great, long-standing relationship with language and music. So could you tell us a little bit about how this turned into a podcast?
Yeah, well, it started actually during the pandemic when we were in remote instruction. And we were looking for activities that we could do outside of the class. There were cooking activities where everyone was on Zoom in their own kitchen cooking, and we were seeing all of the choirs and orchestras performing on Zoom during that time. So we thought, well, hey, why don't we take Language Music Club to Zoom? Seemed like a very natural transition. And one thing that we realized was that, we had students who were overseas who were joining us. And so it made us think, well, you know what, maybe we can take Language Music Club even bigger and reach more people. And how could we do that? That was Ejje's idea.
And then I was thinking about podcasts because I knew Heather listens to a lot of podcasts. And I've always thought Heather had a great podcast voice. So I sent her a message one day just out of the blue and said, hey, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And at that time, I wasn't actually thinking about for language music club related, just in general, any kind of language related podcast. And she replied and said that it was one of her many free time fantasies. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this is something we could do.
It's so wonderful that Heather and Ejje were able to launch something that they knew would be received well, right? In that they already had so much success with using songs in their respective classrooms, students willingly showing up to their club.
Yes. So they have cracked the code, so to speak, in getting students interested in something because it's fun. That's the dream, right? But what else is at play here? Using music to teach language is not only fun, it's also effective. I'd love for you to share a little bit of theory. Why are songs helpful for language acquisition? And, what's the relationship between music and language?
Well, first off, there are many aspects that make songs useful for language learning. I took a whole class in Chinese it was learning Chinese through songs.
Cool.
We sang the whole class. It was one of the best classes I've ever taken. So as a language learner, I think Ejje and I both enjoy learning songs when we're learning language. But there's first the repetition in the song. So you're always repeating the refrain. If it's a catchy song, it's almost like you can't not learn it. It's just stuck there in your mind, going over and over. So that's really helpful for students. The repetition, the vocabulary in use. So there are a lot of phrases and collocations in the songs where you're hearing the vocabulary again and again, and you're hearing it being used in a particular context. So it's hard to forget. And then a lot of songs follow the music of English. So the sentence stress, the intonation, it's easier to imitate when it's in a song. If your teacher is asking you to just listen and repeat, but somehow when it's following a melody, it's a lot easier to imitate. There are a lot of specific segmental sounds that can be practiced in songs. There's a lot of rhyming in songs, just like as in poetry. So being able to pick out the words that rhyme and use those almost, as minimal pair practice for pronunciation. Grammar in use. There are a lot of songs that you can use for past tense practice or unreal conditionals or whatever grammar point you're focusing on. And again, hearing the repetition and the catchy tune, it makes it almost impossible to not learn it using the song.
Yeah, and all those things that Heather was talking about, like we've kind of arrived at intuitively, like just from experience with our enjoying listening to music and trying to use it in language classes. But then just a couple days ago, I came across an article that just came out this week, and it's called Music and Language, very direct and to the point, like our language music club. It was written by this professor that's at the Eastman School of Music, David Temperley. And it's a really nicely written article, but it talks about a lot of those things that Heather mentioned about repetition and the music of language and the rhythm and the intonation and things like that. So I think it was nice to read a well-researched article that kind of reinforces the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's great to feel that whatever you already had, your ideas are reinforced by. In our conversation, Ejay mentions an article, Language and Music by D. Temperley, which we've linked in the show notes, listeners, in case you aren't quite convinced.
But at this point, aren't we all convinced?
Maybe.
Our guests highlight a few essential language components that are naturally built through exposure to music. Vocabulary, grammar, intonation, stress.
Yes, not only larger lexical chunks, but suprasegmentals too, like stress and pitch.
But you can't just play a song and expect students to extrapolate these elements of language without any support.
Right, yeah.
There needs to be training, a build-up. You have to ensure students know what they're looking for.
Of course. And like everything else we do, that starts with aligning music-based activities with student learning outcomes. Good old SLOs.
How does the use of song or music in the classroom support your students achieving those learning outcomes that you determine for them?
Yeah, so what we try to do is focus on one student learning outcome at a time, even though sometimes we find songs that could have several. Try to focus on one at a time, just like we do in other language-focused activities. So we do, for every activity we do in the Language Music Club, we have a specific objective. So it might be certain rhyming words, so certain sounds that we might pre-teach first and practice, and then they listen for it in the song. So we have like the lyrics with those words taken out, and then they have to listen for that specific feature. And then, of course, maybe do some kind of follow-up to apply that objective.
I love that they emphasize the importance of focusing on one objective at a time, even if there might be more than one objective met with the use of one song. This one at a time strategy can be helpful not only in solidifying knowledge for students, but for us as teachers. There's less overwhelm from an instructional perspective.
Yeah. I think that isolation is key here.
It's key.
Yes, it's key, of course. Ejay and Heather also make sure to distinguish between the goals of their context, highlighting how they take different approaches in facilitating Language Music Club and producing podcast episodes.
Sometimes we might have two different objectives. With the podcast, we have more flexibility because the students or anyone listening can listen over and over again. So we do have a focus, like an objective or a student learning outcome, like we do in Language Music Club, but we do go in a lot more depth and talk about vocabulary and other features. But whenever we do it as like a class activity, we do try to focus on one at a time.
And I think it's important to highlight the difference in what are achievable outcomes in, a finite period of time, like, during one of your Language Music Club sessions versus a podcast episode where students have the opportunity to listen, an infinite number of times, really, right? If they're super motivated. So I think that it's important to note that you can go deeper and you can look at these elements of language in a more profound way in an episode versus what's happening in the language club.
Right. And if you have a specific class, this is grammar 2 or grammar B class, and you're focusing on past tense verbs, then you can really zoom in on that and pick a song that's full of past tense verbs. And it'll be directly related to the lesson that the students are working on.
Absolutely. There's just so much opportunity for authentic language learning with music. And we suspect that's true no matter which genre you examine. So we asked them to share what they've discovered to be the most fertile ground for language learning.
And so thinking of achieving these outcomes that might be dictated by a course or just, by the time that you have, what kinds of songs are the most fertile for language teaching and why?
There are a lot of things that we think about when we are trying to choose songs, and sometimes the songs are kind of chosen for us because sometimes we hear a song and then we realize, oh, this would be great for Language Music Club because of this feature. But there are different things we think about. So for the student learning outcome, so the language focus, if something is particularly good to practice something like sentence stress or maybe individual sounds that students sometimes have trouble with. And then also vocabulary, if a song has really useful vocabulary, and to think about related to genre, sometimes the more recent popular pop songs are really good for teaching like everyday vocabulary or slang or figurative language that the students might not hear in our academic English classroom, but that they might hear outside the classroom, and that would be useful for them to learn. Phrasal verbs, of course, because we use those all the time, and those appear in songs often. And then, of course, like Heather said, the grammar. So if there's a certain grammar focus that is useful for the song. And then not just the language features, but we also want to make sure that the song is interesting. Sometimes there's something that's a good language feature, but maybe the song is not as catchy or it's not very ideal to sing along to, because for Language Music Club, we want to sing the song together afterwards. So if it's hard to sing, that kind of makes it a little harder. And if it is something that's catchy, hopefully they will sing along and have it in their head so that there will be the repetition again there. And then we also try to find songs that have a lot of flexibility. So we mentioned that we like to focus on one language objective at a time. But sometimes there's a song that has a lot of great features. So one example is Counting Stars by One Republic. There are a lot of different features in that song, like contractions, reduced pronunciation, present perfect progressive. So I've used that song several times in different ways in the Language Music Club, depending on what language feature we want to focus on. So I talked a lot. Do you have anything to add, Heather?
Yeah, I think that pop music is popular for a reason, that it's catchy and has broad appeal. We had a couple students in Language Music Club this term who said they were really into heavy metal. And we were just, I just don't know if there are any heavy metal songs that are going to work for language learning.
That'd be hard, yeah.
Yeah, I have 3 children and they're really into rap music. They're always sending me, hey, Mom, you could use this song for Language Music Club. And, yeah, there's some interesting features, but there are a lot of other features that I don't know we could talk about in Language Music Club. So we do end up doing a lot of pop music, but we also do try to look at other genres. Our first episode of the podcast that features a group that is comprised of non-native speakers of English is coming out.
That's cool.
Yeah, Etche keeps us on track. She has a great spreadsheet that the genre and the decade, and I'll pick a song and she'll say, Heather, we've already done two episodes in the 2000s. Let's, how about this one from the 60s? Like, oh, okay. All right. You're right.
And it wasn't really planned this way, but now for Language Music Club, what we try to do is we do 2 songs and we try to do one that's kind of modern that students may have heard around. And then we try to do one that's older so that they can have exposure to different genres, different types of music. So I think that's helpful too.
I appreciate that Heather and Edge aren't just choosing songs that align with the SLOs they've come up with for the students, focusing only on language features. They also consider what the students are interested in.
And they choose songs from other decades for variety too, which must be extra fun for students. Yeah. I love that they pay close attention to pop culture and pull in recent releases. I think it's important for students to feel like they're keeping current, accessing and conquering language that their peers are also engaging with.
Yeah, actually, our listener Anya mentioned she uses pop music too. Inspirational songs, especially like Good Life by One Republic.
Oh
my gosh, Shey, you're ridiculous. Those aren't the words, but actually...
Are you sure?
Sure.
They don't just go,
nope.
Good life.
Nope, they're actual words. And Anya can relate. She said that her students were excited to figure out the actual lyrics of the song.
I should join one of her classes. But yeah, it's always fun when the meaning of a song starts to click.
Yeah.
So we asked Heather and Etche about their personal favorites.
Etche, you already mentioned Counting Stars by One Republic was a really good song. Are there any others you want to throw out there? Maybe Heather, if you have a favorite, or Etche, another favorite you want to mention?
Well, I do have a recent favorite that we did in Language Music Club. We did Bill Withers' Lean On Me. And this was a really nice song for us to do because this term we had a really enthusiastic group of students. They were really into it, and it made the Language Music Club so much more fun. And they really sang. Like, usually I only hear myself, but this time you could really hear everyone singing together. And it was so nice because it's such a beautiful song. And to hear these students who are speakers of other languages singing the song in English together was really nice.
I would say my favorite song from an episode, a song that I really like, is Natasha Bedingfield's Unwritten. There's a lot of great figurative language in that song. And when we use it in Language Music Club, asking them, what are those things in the dirty window that are keeping you from achieving your goals, and using that as a little springboard for a discussion and thinking about the figurative language is really, I think it gets them very engaged, not just in the song, but, thinking about how to apply this to their own lives.
Yes. And there's just so much variety in the sampling they've shared.
The options are endless, and so is the possibility of engaging students. But it's more than just engagement, as Heather points out.
We also did You've Got a Friend when we were doing the Language Music Club remotely. And, we're all in our little rectangles on Zoom, and we're all singing together. But it's just this cacophony of different, delayed songs, and nobody's actually singing with the music. And I would just get really choked up because it was so emotional. And thinking of us, literally students zooming in from the other side of the world and all of us singing together, it was really magical and wonderful.
I imagine that being so meaningful. Students come together from all over to sing together over Zoom.
Beautiful, meaningful, all the things. So many reasons to bring music into your classroom. But how, Anna? Where do we start?
Where do we start? Oh no.
I think to help teachers who think that they don't have any experience with music and that they don't know how to use it, I think just making that focus on the language features, making them realize that the focus is the language, and the music is kind of like the bonus to help acquire the language. So what I suggest is when you try to use it in the classroom, if a teacher is trying to use it in the classroom, really emphasize the language focus or the student learning outcome to the students. Because what I've found happens sometimes is when we're doing the Language Music Club activities, and they're supposed to, for example, listen for present perfect. And we tell them, all the blanks that you're listening for are present perfect form. And if you don't really emphasize it, they think they're just, listening for words and writing them down. So I think that's one suggestion I would give for teachers is really make that language feature clear and know that that is what they are listening for.
It's the Language Music Club because the language is the focus. Focus on the language and the singing. It doesn't matter what kind of a singer you are. It really is just fun, and turn the music up and sing along and have a good time with it. And I think if the students see that that the teacher's enjoying it, they're going to maybe reduce their anxiety or whatever inhibitions they have about singing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if you have any sort of tools or resources that you would recommend for teachers who are looking to use songs in the classroom, but maybe don't want to spend, hours creating a podcast to do it.
So, as we know, Google is a teacher's best friend. And literally, if you Google songs with past tense, you'll get so many results. And then you can kind of filter it through the genre of music or the length of the song or any of the other considerations. We were thinking about songs for giving advice. So we Google songs about giving advice. And first one that pops up, you can't always get what you want. That is a great advice song, right?
Yeah.
Another tool that is very useful is that speed control on songs. So if you find a great song, but it's a little bit too fast, you can adjust the tempo of the song so it'd be a little bit slower. And maybe when you're doing the listening part, you can play it a little bit more slowly so you can hear the words more clearly, and then sort of sing it a couple times, increase the speed so you're at regular speed. Those are two things that we've used.
And also, once you start making activities and thinking about it, you kind of start listening to songs in a different way. So there'll be songs that I've listened to, heard so many times, but never really thought about the language. So now we hear a song and like, oh wow, this has really great examples of this sound, or this has really great examples of this grammar feature. So once you start doing it, it becomes easier to find songs just because you are becoming more tuned to listening for those features.
Well, that I love that they led with objectives.
Right? Well, like anything else we do, integrating music as an instructional strategy needs to be, strategic.
Right. But it's not just about dropping your favorite song into a lesson. There's a need to build the structure to support that inclusion.
Yes. And speaking of structure, I love their mention of speed control as a form of scaffolding.
Yeah.
I know that I've used, slow down functionality with TED Talks and other primarily audio resources, but I'd never thought to do the same to access lyrics.
Right. It makes sense, though, right? That, along with the other tips Heather and Eche shared, have made me feel like this is so doable.
But wait, there's more.
So I guess our last question here is about your podcast, which is, your podcast is student facing, whereas ours is teacher facing. So we're really curious to hear how your podcast has been received by listeners. Have you used it with your students? How can teachers use it with their students? Do you know of any teachers who have reported back that they've used it with their students?
So we've gotten a lot of feedback. So we, in our intensive English program, some students keep in touch through social media, our institute's social media. So when the institute posted our podcast, there were comments from former students who are saying things like, oh, it's so nice to hear my teachers again, and such good memories. So kind of connecting with the students that way. And then some lower level students have made comments that they're able to understand, and which is really rewarding for them, that they can listen to a podcast and understand everything.
That's so nice to hear.
I think for teachers, like we hope that teachers can use the podcast because we really are planning for it to be used by learners and teachers, that teachers could use it as a resource. We have the whole transcript of each episode on our website. We try to have an activity up there that's already made, that kind of a grab and go that teachers could use. We've tried to point out the interesting language features in each episode so that there's even a quote in each episode. If you wanted to start with a quote, that we use. We would welcome teachers to use any aspect of the content to just basically almost, we hope, have a lesson prepared for them. These are things that you can point out. Here's an activity, and they could use it that way. If you wanted to have extra listening homework for your class, you could choose an episode, listen to an episode. We would not be unhappy about that. That would be great.
Just the best.
Listeners, we've linked Heather and Etch's podcast in the show notes, and we hope you'll check out the resources that they offer on their website.
And we'd love to hear from you. How have you integrated music into your English language classroom? What's your favorite song to teach and why?
You can join the conversation on social media or email us at teacherthinkaloud@gmail.com. We welcome your reflections, questions, and ideas.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. And until next time, happy teaching
and happy reflecting.